Yeah. So yeah, roasting process is definitely one of the big challenge, and it is. I'm sure it is big challenge for like communication with customers. Like in yeah, roaster's position, when I explain my roasted coffee to the cafe owners or customers, one of the biggest challenges I faced at the very beginning was the tasting notes that I tasted in this coffee is really hard to translate in their setup.
Yeah.
Even if I give them my brewing recipe, my water, and even when I get to those space and brew coffee and actually taste the coffee from the same brew, it is so hard to communicate about the flavor because everyone perceives same flavor in different way. So, is there any particular way or your style of communication on the flavor with your customers?
I mean, there's a real range of skills. I think with some roasters that are just starting out, some roasters have been in it for a long time. A lot of people taste like in a bubble, so they taste with the same people over and over again. So you kind of have a shorthand, but that can limit you in terms of growth and developing your palate outside of your zone. But I try and you just have to listen to people and talk to them, and ask them questions and be willing to hear the feedback. So because this company was started by passionate coffee people with a long history in it, so we have a little bit of a leg up, I think, with talking about how you brew and how you roast. And, if you get into the industry, this side of the industry, import side, and you don't have a real strong background, say as a barista or something, it could be a real challenge because then your customers are in a more higher knowledge position than yourself, which makes it challenging to sell to them. But it's all about just listening and talking about it and be willing to hear the feedback. So if you hear feedback on a coffee that you think is really good and they don't like it, just listen to what they have to say. Because there's some fantastic tasters out there and some fantastic roasters, and I learn things every day from people. It's one thing about coffee, is you constantly have to be learning. You never know everything, even if you've been doing it 20 years. There's still something to learn every day, and even if it's their first roast ever, you can still learn something from that person's feedback. But you have to. I think it's a challenge to be on the same page skill-wise, and then try and get things to translate properly. It can be tough, but it's just a communication thing and just listening, I think.
How about communication with producers or exporter in the origin? Because I think that could be more challenging because their culture is different and their regular drink and food culture is different. Their tasting notes description is different than ours. How's it challenging?
That's a huge challenge, but the biggest problem is because most farmers before, still mostly the case now, but before they didn't drink their own product, right? So you go to the great coffee farm, it produces fantastic coffee and you get instant coffee from a big brand because it's considered to be better. So, it's amazing that farmers are drinking their own coffee and appreciating it. But, when I first started out, I said that to someone, they're like, well, the reason why they don't drink it is because it's every pound they drink is one less pound they can sell. So, which makes a lot of sense, right? So, if you're a farmer, any type of farmer, you're going to sell your best and keep if you're a potato farmer, you keep the funny looking ones or the little ones, or you sell the best ones. So, you shouldn't get on a high horse and say, oh, you should drink your own coffee. Well, they still have to sell.
Yeah.
But, growing in the industry and everyone getting more experience and feedback loops help, and also listening, right? So if you're the type of person where your physical stats for your coffee have to be perfect, but the farmer had rain one day and it's going to throw it off a little bit, you have to be willing to flex a little bit and understand where they're coming from. That's why taking a long-term focus is important. So we're not in it for 1 year, and if it doesn't perform as well, we just drop them. We want to develop something that's ongoing and long-lasting. And you have to, be willing to be flexible a little bit sometimes and listen to feedback for sure. And not just the good feedback.
Yeah.
Listen to the negative feedback or, opportunities to improve.
Is there any particular things that farmers are demanding to make products? Because,
Yeah, I mean, they're in a tough position, right? Because they're trying to sell to a faraway market, and they can be quite vulnerable in terms of the price of their product is controlled completely out of their hands, with the C market. So it's a real tough position to be in. But we try and pay, as much as we possibly can afford to pay, and still resell the coffee. We try not to. We work in a cost plus system, so whatever the farmer wants for the coffee, we put our margin on it, and that's what we sell it for. But the most thing they want to know is, what people think of their coffee. Where does it go? Because they're just as curious about where it ends up as we are about where it comes from. So they're trying to keep them, on the same page about where their coffees end up, and the feedback from people, and what they got excited about, what they maybe didn't quite get from a varietal or whatever, and trying to improve it for next year. So it's important to keep them as part of the feedback loop as well. That's a challenge as an importer too, so you're constantly talking to different people and different cultures and different languages, trying to make the most of that. Can be tough, but can be really rewarding as well.
Yeah. When our last guest with Jill, and her main topic was sustainability, and she did a few researches during the SCA course. She needed to do certain tasks, She needed to do
projects.
projects. During she taking the sustainability course from SCA, she needed to do certain projects. So she did a survey with different producers, and like she said, the most common answer that the farmers want for us is just know them, know who they are, and where the coffee source is from. So in the green importers point of view, what does that mean for the producers? Knowing them, and we put their name on our coffee bag and on our website, we kind of put all the details and descriptors, farmers. What does that mean for them?
I think it's powerful for sure.
Yeah.
To hand someone their product back in a bag with a label and it's got the family name on it, and it's a real sense of pride, I would say, if I'm speaking for them, based on the feedback that I get. That's a huge sense of pride. But on the same token, you have to treat that responsibly too, right? So if you're going to use their name and pictures of them at their farm and stuff, it should be done in an ethical way and with their permission. And I'm uncomfortable with saying something is mine. The coffees aren't mine; they're their coffees.
Yeah.
And so we always market it like that. We're working with them, they don't work for us. We work with them to promote their name and their coffee.
Yeah.
In as fair a way as possible. We're not interjecting ourselves into the transaction. It's not something we advertise that we're out selling these coffees. I mean, it's the farmers' coffees. That's what we try and push as much as possible. But yeah, every time we bring those bags back to origin, it's a huge sense of pride.
Yeah. I should send more of my coffee to you when you're next year.
It's become challenging in the pandemic, though. I find to do everything, anything return to origin, shipping, or bonus payments or anything is almost impossible to do. So once we start being able to travel again, then to bring them in a suitcase is a lot simpler.
And you briefly mentioned bonus payments. Can you explain a little bit further about the bonus payments?
Depends on the country that you work in, but farmers usually have a set amount that they can sell their coffee for, whether that's in cherry form, like in fruit form, or in a processed parchment form, or whatnot. We always try and pay higher prices than they can get locally, obviously, and much higher in some cases, to reward them for the quality that they produce. We try and, as much as we can, tie those prices that we pay to the cost of production, not to the C market, because we want to be able to go back. I meet these people face to face. I don't want to go back and like some big shot, and knowing that we ripped them off with their product. So if I'm going to be face to face with them, I want them to be proud and happy with the transaction we did last year. So yeah.
And in coffee market, coffee price, there are different portions in the market, different sectors in the entire coffee market. C market, specialty coffee industry in general, and there are auction coffees, and their price tag is quite huge.
Yeah.
Can you briefly teach us how the price is setting up? Because even I don't really know the coffee prices, how it is set up, and why it is so widely different.
Yeah, I'm not an economist. I'm not an expert on it, and I've been in the industry, so that should tell you something. But the price that most farmers get is tied to the C market, so it operates in the New York Stock Exchange as a commodity, so it's traded and fluctuates daily.
Yeah.
So in every country, usually that's a base, and then they have an in-country differential, so something that gets set based on their individual costs and how things operate in that country as a bump up. And that's what they get, and then there could be different bonuses for certifications or for quality. But we try to look at it the other way. So what does it cost to produce a pound of coffee, or whatever unit you want to use in whatever country that is, and work backwards from there. That's what we try and do. But yeah, it's super complicated, and that type of pricing model doesn't take into account any cost of production. It's totally independent of that. Auction coffees, again, that's just a market demand thing. So what are you willing to pay for a coffee that's excellent? And it's just whatever that is, like any auction. There's the in-between models, so like people say is direct trade, which is a widely used term with no set definition, but people try and pay prices that are above C market, but below a certain line. Anyway, it gets really complicated. What we just try and do is work with trusted partners on the ground that can give us information about what the farmer wants for the coffee, what's a fair price, and in some cases we just bump it up because they're not asking for enough coffee or enough money for their coffee. We just try and be as fair as we possibly can with the information that we have. And every country is so different. This system works really well in some countries. It doesn't work very well in other countries at all. Depends on how organized they are. So it's a complicated question because you can't lump the entire industry together.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with so many different countries, but generally that's how it works.
And yes, especially coffee. Is it kind of like set? There's no set definition of specialty coffee, right? Is it commonly used term, or is it actually the term?
I think from the SCA they say anything that scores above 80 points is considered quote specialty.
Yeah.
But as we all know, an 80-point coffee and an 88-point coffee are completely different universes. So, perhaps there needs to be some more work done into that. But yeah, for us, what we try and do is 85 plus on every coffee that we work with. Fairly traded in an ethical way, purchased in an ethical way. Not fair trade, because I think that's a whole other quagmire, which we don't have to get into. But yeah, we try and be as fair and equitable as we can. And the farmers are running a business as well, so we're there to do a business deal, make it fair, and then so if everyone is happy, we go back the next year and do the same thing. We increase as we can. We try and increase every year for payments.
Then what is your definition of specialty coffee outside of like SCA's like said, or like in the coffee industry? Every organization is using specialty coffee, but they are defined the meaning of the specialty coffee differently. What is your version?
I think specialty is, like, to me, if I'm talking about specialty, it would be 85 plus. And then that 80 to 85 range is not my term, it's someone else's term, but they call it high commercial coffee. So commercial coffee would be 80 points and below, so commercial is the general stuff you get. High commercial, you can still serve it and brew it in a really good way, it's still tasty, but it's not like one of those eye-popping wow coffees. So for me, 85 plus is what I would use as a term, but that's only my opinion.
Any other topics you want to talk about, or you expect me to ask and I haven't done yet?
It was pretty thorough. I think what people need to think about on the consumer side and on the roasting side as well, when you have so much power with your dollar. So what do you want the industry to be? Do you want it to be people that are driving the costs as low as possible, or what do you want it to be, and use your dollar to vote for what you want the industry to be. So do you want it to be dominated by chains that maybe pay okay, but you're not getting any traceability? Or, if that's what you want the industry to be, then buy those coffees. But if you want the industry to do something better with local focus and it's making more of an impact at the farm level, then for your daily coffee, don't go to that chain every day. Go to your local shop, give them a shot. Buy those retail bags of beans, support them. Take their online classes. It might cost you more, but cheap coffee has a massive cost. Massive. It's like cheap anything that, like a T-shirt that costs $1. The amount of I don't want to say exploitation, that's a strong word, but the amount of issues that can create down the supply chain is massive. And coffee's the exact same way. So buying the cheapest cup of coffee and justifying it by, I have to buy it every day, it's too expensive. Well, there's other ways to do it that are not causing harm in the industry. So I think that's so critical. People need to know. And it's literally like 50 cents a cup more. Everybody, I think, can afford 50 cents a cup more.